Hey, true crime fanatics, this is Claire.
And I'm Andy.
You're tuned in to the Homicide Hobbies podcast, which is a podcast for people who love to hear about the horrendous crimes that people commit. Enjoy. Okay, what do you have today?
This place has a city that was a massive magnet for young pacifists, artists, and students who wanted to avoid
California.
terrorist service. For decades, the legislature or lawmakers met in an abandoned warehouse because the government refused to build a permanent structure.
Still California. Sorry.
In 1920, with just a sack of sugar, a marble slab, and a copper kettle, Harborough was found by Hans Riegel Sr. In 1922, he invented the dancing bear, which is gummy bears.
Sounds like a southern state. Wait, the Netherlands?
Today, we'll be discussing a murder trial that took place in West Germany. It drew national attention in 1981.
So not California.
Also, this was sent to us by Paulina. So
she finds some good ones, and by good ones, I mean very bad ones.
Yep, this one's another one. A child had been killed, a suspect was in custody, and a grieving mother sat quietly in the courtroom gallery waiting for justice to unfold. At first glance, there was nothing remarkable about her. She wasn't a lawyer. She wasn't a witness. She wasn't part of the legal system at all. She was simply a mother attending the trial of the man who was accused of murdering her daughter. But to understand what would eventually make this case unforgettable, you have to start decades earlier, long before the courtroom, long before the crime, and long before the grief became a public spectacle. This is the story of Marianne Bachmeier. Marianne Bachmeier was born on June 3rd, 1950, in a small town in West Germany. Her parents were refugees from East Prussia. They were displaced in the aftermath of World War II and trying to rebuild a life in a country still marked by destruction and loss. Home life was strict and deeply conservative. Religion shaped daily expectations, obedience was demanded, and emotional warmth appears to have been limited. Marianne's father was a member of the Waffen-SS, which I did have to look up what that was, and it means he served in the Nazi military organization.
Oh.
Historical records show he was part of the Waffen-SS, which doesn't specify his level of involvement in the Nazi political activities, but his membership alone indicates his alignment with the regime during the war. So if that tells you what kind of feller he is, he's a Nazi by affiliation. He embodied rigid post-war authority. He drank heavily and spent much of his time at a nearby bar before returning home increasingly unpredictable. Alcohol often intensified his aggression, creating an environment Marianne later described as tense and very unpleasant. Her parents eventually divorced, but stability did not follow. Her mother remarried, and Marianne's relationship with her stepfather quickly deteriorated. She would later characterize him as domineering and controlling, another authority figure enforcing discipline rather than offering love and support. As Marianne entered adolescence, conflict at the home escalated. She was labeled as rebellious or troubled, and by her mid-teens, the relationship between Marianne and her stepfather was fractured completely. In 1966, her mother was ultimately forced to choose between her husband and her teenage daughter. She decided to go ahead and kick Marianne out of the home.
Oh, that was not the route I thought it was going.
Sure wasn't. At just 16 years old, Marianne was on her own. She moved between friends, acquaintances, and temporary lodgings, surviving largely independently. I feel like it shouldn't be surprising when I tell you later that same year, Marianne gave birth to her first child. She was just 16 years old.
Oh.
Lacking financial stability or family support, she made the painful decision to place the baby up for adoption. Just 2 years later, barely 18, she became pregnant again. Shortly before giving birth, she was sexually assaulted. Yet another traumatic event.
Oh my God. And then she ends up murdered?
Another traumatic event layered into an already unstable young adulthood. Her second child, she was also forced to place up for adoption. So by 18, Marianne had experienced repeated trauma, displacement, family rejection, motherhood ×2, giving away not one, but 2 babies, and these experiences would shape nearly every decision she would make afterwards. She began working evenings and nights in bars and restaurants, eventually taking a job at a pub.
I feel like the last thing she needs is to be around a pub.
Right? But she would spend long hours behind the bar and gaining independence from her unstable home life. In 1972, while dating the pub's manager, Marianne she's now 22 years old, became pregnant again.
My God. Does she not know how it starts?
This time, she was living a more stable life, but don't be confused by her life.
More stable? It was never stable, so literally anything, just the job is like stability.
I think by stable, I think her having a roof over her head and she's not having to ask, hey, can I stay with you, is more stable than she's ever been. But don't be confused by her life. It's definitely not a picture of stability. She just chooses differently with this little one. And on November 14th, 1972, Marianne gave birth to her third child, a daughter she named Anna Bachmeier.
Oh, that's who gets murdered.
The child was the first child Marianne would be able to keep.
Oh, no. And she gets murdered?
Marianne continued to work at the pub where she'd been employed when she became pregnant. She raised Anna largely on her own, navigating long nights behind the bar while managing life as a single mother.
Who watched the kid?
Anna's father did not play a role in their daily lives. As a single mother working nights, Marianne did the only thing she could think to do. She would often bring Anna to the pub during her shifts.
Ew.
Customers grew accustomed to seeing the child nearby while her mother worked behind the bar late into the evening.
All right.
Their relationship was close but unconventional. Friends later recalled that Anna was given significant independence from a young age, and she was often treated more like a companion or a tiny adult rather than the young child that she was. Marianne herself later acknowledged that her lifestyle was difficult to balance with motherhood. Long nights frequently meant late mornings, and Anna sometimes navigated parts of daily life all on her little own.
She's Matilda.
She really was. Despite this instability, those who knew Anna described her as vibrant, trusting, and eager for connection, a child who adapted to the world she was given rather than the one she deserved. By 1980, Marianne and Anna were living in Lübeck, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right. Did my best. Life appeared to be settling into something closer to routine. On May 5th, 1980, after an argument with her mother, Anna, who's now 7, decided she's going to skip school.
Oh, no.
She popped on over to visit a neighbor. It was a home of a couple who would let Anna come over and play with their cats. Then Anna disappeared. What followed would become one of the most devastating criminal cases in modern German history. It would place Marianne at the center of national controversy about grief, justice, and accountability. Police quickly began investigating Anna's disappearance. Sadly, later that same day, police discovered a cardboard box left on the bank of a nearby canal. Inside the box were the remains of 7-year-old Anna Bachmeier. She had been tied up and sexually assaulted.
Oh, what the fuck, Andrea?
Before being strangled to death and stuffed into a cardboard box that was dumped to be forgotten. Her abductor was a 35-year-old butcher. He was the neighbor with the cats.
No.
This piece of trash, his name is Klaus Grabowski.
Isn't this your second Klaus?
I don't know. Klaus was a convicted sex offender and had already been in prison once for sexually abusing 2 young girls. In 1976, just 4 years prior to Anna being killed, Klaus voluntarily agreed to be chemically castrated while in prison for those assaults.
How old is he?
He's 35.
I thought you said he, like an old neighbor, like an elderly.
I did not.
I just assumed a man with a lot of cats.
I said it was a couple with cats. He volunteered to be chemically castrated as a condition to be released from prison early. But there's a catch, and I didn't know this. Chemical castration is reversible once the medication is no longer being taken.
Oh.
Or opposing hormones can be taken. So little did anyone know that Klaus not only stopped maintaining the chemical castration, in fact, he began receiving hormone therapy in an attempt to restore the use of his little wee-wee.
How did he do that? Because wouldn't it be like some sort of...
I don't know where he got the hormone therapy from, but I just know that they said he began actually taking hormones to restore the use of his penis. Klaus was arrested shortly after his fiancée, who was aware of his violent tendencies and fearing complicity if he did have anything to do with Anna's death. She went to the police and told them, yeah, so you might want to go check on this here feller. He likes the little girls, and she was our neighbor.
Hold up, she knew that?
Yeah, she knew about his past. Mm-hmm.
And she let her daughter go over there and play with the cats?
No. Klaus's fiance.
Oh.
The piece of shit had a fiance that lived there.
Yeah. She knew he liked little girls, and that's...
Yeah. But to be fair to her, she was
No.
also like, the second the little girl, something happened, she went to the police, which is what led to him being arrested, and later to his bizarre confession to the crime.
Andrea.
Oh, she's got a bad picker for sure. Why she's with somebody that's been in prison.
Yeah. No, why would you even be engaged to somebody that you're like, he may be diddling little girls on the side?
Definitely wouldn't be a pick for me.
She looked like a dog, huh?
I actually did not look up what she looked like. Klaus, he did confess to killing Anna. Klaus claimed that he had to strangle Anna with his fiance's pantyhose because the little girl was trying to blackmail him.
What?
Yeah, this bullshit.
It's like that one thing that you sent me where the guy said the 3-year-old girl kept hitting on him.
Pretty much, because Klaus claimed that Anna had seduced him, and
oh my God.
Afterwards, she threatened to tell her mother that he molested her if he didn't give her any money.
A 7-year-old?
Uh-huh. And he swears he did not abuse her.
Yeah, he did.
Just to recap his nonsense story, a 7-year-old seduced a 35-year-old man and then threatened to blackmail him.
I could see if she were a teenager, because those gals are dangerous. But 7?
He's a piece of shit. Police officially arrest Klaus Grabowski, a man whose background quickly intensified public outrage as details emerged during the investigation. Because every normal person, the non-pedophile types, were all like, why on earth was he walking free after he'd already sexually abused 2 other children?
And?
The police were like, yeah, we're not sure, but he's in custody now.
Because it was the 70s.
For Marianne, the arrest did not bring closure. Instead, it marked the beginning of interrogations, media attention, and the painfully slow legal process. Every hearing required her to relive the loss again, this time under public scrutiny. When the trial finally began in March of 1981, a year after Anna's murder, Marianne attended the court proceedings alongside journalists and spectators. Day after day, she sat in the gallery as testimony began, listening, watching, waiting, trying to process the details of her baby girl's final hours. Courtrooms are designed to deliver justice through procedure, patience, and law. But grief does not operate on schedules, and sometimes the most pivotal moment in a case arrives without warning, changing not only a trial, but an entire country's understanding of justice itself. On March 6, 1981, it was the 3rd day of Klaus's trial.
She shot him.
The grief and outrage that had been building inside Marianne reached a breaking point as proceedings resumed at the regional court in Lübeck. It was expected to be another ordinary day in what had already become a closely followed trial. Journalists filled the benches early, notebooks ready, lawyers organized their documents at their tables, while court officials prepared to continue testimony. Among the spectators sat Marianne Bachmeier. By then, her presence was familiar. She had attended the 2 previous hearings where she sat quietly, rarely drawing attention to herself. Like many parents of victims, she watched the proceedings from the gallery, listening as the legal system worked through procedures that often felt painfully slow. She sat waiting for justice to prevail. When Klaus Grabowski was brought into the courtroom, the morning began as expected. At one point during the session, Marianne stood from her seat. For a moment, no one reacted. Movement in a courtroom was common enough. Someone leaving, stretching, adjusting position. She then reaches into her handbag. Witnesses would later describe confusion before comprehension. The object in her hand did not immediately register until the first shot rang out.
Whoa.
The sound shattered the routine calm of the courtroom. Panic followed almost instantly. Marianne continued to fire her .22 caliber Beretta pistol at her daughter's killer as people ducked beneath tables and scrambled for cover. Marianne fired a total of 8 shots before the court officials were able to intervene. The courtroom was in chaos. When it was over, Marianne Bachmeier did not attempt to escape. She lowered her gun and allowed herself to be taken into custody inside the same courtroom where she had spent the last 2 days listening to the torture her little girl experienced, hearing how her 7-year-old had supposedly seduced a 35-year-old pervert, listening to the things her baby went through for several hours before her little life was violently taken.
And naturally, she'll get a life sentence where he was diddling kids left and right.
Trying her best to wait for justice, she was heard saying in that moment, "He killed my daughter. I want to shoot him in the face, but I had to shoot him in the back. I hope he's dead. I did it for you, Anna."
How many times did she actually hit him?
Of the 8 shots she fired at Klaus's back, 6 hit Klaus Grabowski. He was killed almost instantly.
Bummer.
News of what had happened spread across Germany within hours. A murder trial had ended, not with a verdict, but with another killing, carried out not by the accused, not by the court, but by the victim's mother. The reaction was immediate and deeply divided. Some viewed Marianne's actions as a direct attack on the rule of law, arguing that allowing personal vengeance inside a courtroom threatened the very foundation of justice itself. Others saw something entirely different. Letters of support arrived from across the country. Many expressed sympathy for not what she had done, but for the grief that had driven her there. Public debate moved beyond legal definitions and into uncomfortable moral territory. Was she a criminal?
Yes.
Or a mother pushed to her limit?
It can be both.
The question dominated headlines, television discussions, and dinner tables throughout West Germany. And soon, Marianne would once again find herself in that courtroom. Only this time, she was the one on trial. This time, as she sat in the courtroom, she was no longer seated among the grieving spectators. She entered as the defendant. The legal question before the court appeared straightforward. Marianne Bachmeier had brought a firearm into the courtroom and intentionally killed Klaus Grabowski in front of witnesses, judges, and members of the press. There was no dispute about what had happened. She had confessed almost immediately, but the simplicity ended there, because the trial quickly became less about the act itself and more about the woman who committed the crime. Was Marianne Bachmeier a distraught mother simply trying to avenge the brutal death of her child, or did her act of vigilantism make her a cold-blooded killer herself? Psychologists were called to testify about Marianne's mental state in the months following her daughter's murder. Experts described overwhelming grief, trauma, and emotional collapse. The court heard how she had attended proceedings day after day, forced to listen to testimony connected to the loss of her child. When the psychologist asked her for a writing sample, she wrote out, "I did it for you, Anna," and then decorated the sample with 7 little hearts, possibly one for each year of Anna's life. Defense attorneys argued that her actions were born not from calculated revenge, but from psychological devastation. Prosecutors, of course, disagreed. They emphasized the preparation, the weapon, the planning, the decision to bring the gun into the courtroom. To them, the act was
calculated.
To them, the act represented vigilantism carried out in one of the few places society depends upon absolute order. Outside the courtroom, crowds gathered daily. Some arrived to condemn her, others came to simply show support. Flowers appeared, letters continued arriving, donations were collected for her legal defense. Public opinion remained sharply divided. Marianne even sold her story to Stern magazine for roughly $158,000 to help cover her legal expenses during the trial. Germany was no longer just watching a criminal trial. It was debating the limits of empathy. In 1983, the court delivered its verdict. Marianne Bachmeier was found guilty of manslaughter rather than murder. Judges acknowledged that the killing had been intentional, but they also recognized extraordinary emotional circumstances surrounding the crime. The ruling reflected an attempt to balance legal responsibility with psychological reality. She was sentenced to, I'm going to guess?
5 years. Time served!
6 years in prison.
I'm a good guesser.
No, you're not. Earlier you said she got life.
There's no need for that. That was before I had all the information.
For some observers, the punishment was too lenient. For others...
Does somebody shoot her?
For others, any sentence at all felt excessive. Even after judgment was handed down, disagreement lingered. The case resisted clean conclusions. It forced uncomfortable questions about justice, grief, and whether emotional suffering could ever truly be separated from criminal responsibility. Marianne ultimately served only part of her sentence before being released early in June of 1985, roughly halfway through her sentence. But freedom did not mean anonymity. After her release, Marianne Bachmeier lived largely under public scrutiny. Documentaries and interviews followed, including portrayals examining both the courtroom shooting and complicated life that preceded it. Some media outlets framed her as a tragic figure shaped by hardship. Others continued to question whether sympathy had overshadowed accountability. She later moved abroad for periods of time. She first moved to Nigeria, where she then got married and remained in Nigeria into the 1990s. She was attempting to live outside the constant attention that followed her name in Germany. So even after her and her husband divorced, she did not want to go back home to Germany and said she moved to Sicily. Throughout the years, the case never fully faded. It remained a reference point whenever discussions arose about victims' rights, vigilante justice, or emotional limits of the legal system. Marianne was living in Sicily when she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. At that point, she returned home to Germany. Marianne Bachmeier passed away September 17, 1996, at the age of 46. She was laid to rest next to her daughter, Anna. Even in death, debate surrounding her actions continued. The story of Marianne Bachmeier does not end neatly. A child was lost, a man was killed, and a courtroom meant to deliver justice became part of the tragedy itself. What remains was not a simple question of innocence or guilt, but something far more unsettling. What happens when personal grief collides with institutional justice and refuses to wait for permission? There are cases where justice feels clear. This is not one of them. Marianne Bachmeier did something undeniable inside a courtroom built to uphold the law. The facts are not disputed. The outcome is not uncertain. And yet, more than 40 years later, people still argue about whether what happened that day was justice, revenge, or something that exists uncomfortably between the two. Because the truth is, courts can deliver sentences, but they cannot deliver closure.
I understand why she had to have some sort of a punishment because they can't outwardly agree with being a vigilante.
Right. But I also have understanding for her actions because I could only
Right.
imagine sitting there listening to a defense attorney claim that I was a terrible mother, even though I was doing the best that I could. And
So that's kind of difficult because she really wasn't in a position to take care of her.
well,
So the best she could, she gave away 2 other kids because she knew. I feel like the third one, she was just tired of doing the giving of aways. But realistically, she wasn't in a position to raise a kid.
yeah. Well,
That's how she ended up not even noticing when she didn't go to school because she was probably passed out. Not from being drunk, but I'm just saying passed out probably of exhaustion.
well, no matter how she raised her daughter, it doesn't excuse
No,
a 35-year-old man claiming that a 7-year-old seduced him.
I agree.
And I think sitting through 2 days of hearing that is what led to her ultimately snapping. I get that it brings closure, but at the same time, like, not saying she shouldn't have been in there, but at least, I don't know. That's a tough one because it's like,
No.
if she didn't hear the garbage that they were saying, she's still stuck within her own grief. But I think hearing the details of whatever concocted story, and knowing he'd already done it twice is like, it's disgusting. He's a piece of shit.
He is.
Thanks for that, Paulina. That was a disturbing case.
I find it disturbing still the lady who was with the feller.
Yeah.
I mean, way to go for her for turning on him because it could have been interesting. Well, not interesting, but it could have gone a different route if they couldn't figure out how she died or who killed her.
Yeah.
Well, what did he do with her?
You mean after he killed
Yeah.
her?
Where did they find the body?
He stuffed her in a cardboard box and he dumped her by a nearby canal.
The crazy cat man.
Mm-hmm.
Although I was going to say if it was like a case of she goes over to the neighbor's house to play with the cats and then was walking home and got abducted, that I was going to be pissed at the neighbors anyway because they should know she's supposed to be in school.
Yeah. That's where Marianne was judged very harshly by the public because her daughter would often take herself to school.
Yeah, she was on her own.
Yeah.
Well, that's where I go back to, molesters aside, she was leaving room for anybody to, or anything to happen to her daughter because she was treating her like she was an adult.
Yeah.
Rather than being her parent. And that's where I was saying that I don't think she was ready for a third kid. Not to say that her daughter deserved anything of what she got, not at all. But I do think she has accountability in that because she wasn't being a parent at any point.
Yeah, I agree. I was curious if she had any more kids after Anna.
Is she?
She did not.
Thank you for listening to Homicide Hobbies. I'm Claire.
I'm Andy.
Follow us each week to get your fix of the atrocities that occur in true crime. And don't forget to tell people about us and rate us if you like us. But don't rate us if you didn't. Just change the channel.